The US is an enormous place, and today we're going to break it down by bringing you one amazing fact about each state. Starting off with Alabama. Though space travel is more often associated with Cape Canaveral, Florida, or the Space Center in Houston, the real rocket capital of the country is Huntsville, Alabama. The rocket that put man on the moon for the first time was developed and tested at the Marshall Space Flight Center, or MSFC. Today, you can visit the U.S. Space and Rocket Center to get a glimpse into the city's space travel history. Alaska. Alaska has more glaciers than the entire rest of the inhabited world. Over 100,000 of them cover the U.S.'s northernmost state, and 25% of them, covering around 4.6 million acres, are found within Alaska's many national parks. Since glaciers require lots of snowfall and cool summers to form, Alaska provides perfect conditions. Some parts of the state, like Harding Icefield, receive around 60 feet or 19 meters of snow per year. The biggest is the Malaspina Glacier, which measures 850 square miles or 2,200 square kilometers and spans 60 miles or 97 kilometers across. Arizona. Arizona is the state with the most sky islands. These aren't some futuristic floating isles. A sky island is an isolated mountain area that has such steep elevation changes from the valleys below it. That means it creates a totally different ecosystem on the mountain itself. These areas are found in northwestern Mexico, Arizona, and New Mexico, but Arizona has over 40 sky islands within its borders, with more plant diversity than any other area in the country. Some mountains are more than 6,000 feet or 1,800 meters above the desert floor, a place that's generally inhospitable to most plants and animals. This makes the mountains themselves a much better refuge for all kinds of species. Arkansas. The U.S.'s only active diamond mine is located in Arkansas. And if you'd like, you can even go searching for diamonds there yourself. 150,000 to 170,000 people visit the Crater of Diamonds State Park every year, hoping to find a diamond and pay off a trip to the supermarket. Visitors find more than 600 diamonds every year. The biggest diamond ever found in the U.S. was discovered at the Crater of Diamonds. Nicknamed Uncle Sam, it was a massive 40.2 carat gem unearthed back in 1924. Imagine the kind of ring that would make. California. It's a testament to the state's extreme geographic diversity that California has both the highest and lowest points in the continental U.S. within its borders. Better yet, they're only 85 miles or 137 kilometers apart, so you could theoretically visit both in one day. Badwater Basin, the lowest point of scorching hot Death Valley, is 282 feet or 86 meters below sea level. While just a couple of hours' drive southeast of it, you'll find Mount Whitney, the tallest mountain in the contiguous United States, towering up to 14,500 feet or 4,400 meters above sea level. Colorado. Colorado is not, as the map would suggest, a square. In fact, this angular-looking state actually has 697 sides. We looked it up, and that makes it a hexahectaenneacontici heptagon. Bet you didn't learn that one in elementary school. That's because even though Colorado's borders are technically drawn across the 102nd and 109th meridians, as well as the 41st and 37th parallels, they were drawn in the late 1800s with the incredibly basic tools surveyors used at the time. Not to mention, drawing borders on the meridians on the curved, slightly squashed Earth's surface doesn't always mean they come out even. Connecticut. One of the largest dinosaur track sites in the world is in Connecticut. The Dinosaur State Park contains a 200-million-year-old fossil trackway, as well as a museum explaining the finds. In fact, the first dinosaur tracks ever found in the country were discovered in 1802 in the Connecticut River Valley, even though the actual site was just across the border in South Hadley, Massachusetts. But from that day on, the valley has attracted paleontologists from all over the country in search of tracks much like the 750 footprints from the Jurassic period left in Dinosaur State Park. Delaware. Delaware has more corporate entities than people. With a population of 1.05 million people, the state has over 2 million registered business entities. So why is everyone rushing to register in Delaware? The state has a very business-friendly legal framework. There's no minimum bank account requirement for a company to operate. Also, business owners don't need to list their names when filing their initial papers to start a business, keeping the company private and names off the public record. And perhaps most importantly of all, there's no state income tax on businesses formed in Delaware that don't operate in Delaware. The business environment is so favorable that 67.8% of Fortune 500 companies are based in Delaware. And in 2022, 79% of all companies with an IPO are technically Delaware corporations. Florida. Though Florida may be better known for its beautiful beaches, the state is also famous for another water-related fact. Florida has the most freshwater springs not only in the country, but in the entire world. Geologists have identified over 600 to 1,000 springs, depending on the source, and 33 of them are relatively huge, with 65 million gallons or 246 million liters per day flowing through them. So why does Florida have so many? Underneath the state are layers of limestone and dolomite, which are easily penetrated and dissolved by rainwater, creating natural openings. When groundwater flows close to the surface, especially under pressure, it comes up through those same openings. Georgia. The biggest swamp in the country isn't the Florida Everglades. It's in southern Georgia. The Okefenokee, a Creek Indian name that means land of the trembling earth, is actually the largest swamp in North America, measuring 684 square miles, or just under 1,800 square kilometers. That means the entire city of Los Angeles could fit inside of it. This protected area is one of the largest intact freshwater areas in the world and is home to animals from amphibians to alligators and black bears. It's nicknamed Trembling Earth because there's a lot of peat in the soil, making it very difficult to walk on since it shifts underneath your feet. Hawaii. Hawaii is the longest island chain in the world, made up of 132 islands, though only 7 are inhabited. You probably already know that it's the only US state that's also an archipelago, but since most people only know the inhabited Hawaiian islands, Niihau, Lanai, Molokai, Kauai, Oahu, Maui, and Big Island, they don't know how far this chain actually stretches. From the southernmost Big Island to the northernmost Kuri Atoll, the chain stretches 1,500 miles or 2,400 kilometers across the Pacific Ocean. Idaho. Though the Grand Canyon may be the most famous gorge in the country, it's not the deepest. That title goes to the appropriately named Hell's Canyon in Idaho. The Snake River carved out the continent's deepest river gorge over millions of years, causing it to dip 8,000 feet or 2,400 meters below Idaho's Seven Devils Mountains and over 1 mile beneath Oregon's West Rim. The canyon is located near the Oregon-Washington-Idaho border. There are no roads across Hell's Canyon. If you want to get across it, you have to hike. According to Backpacker magazine, the Oregon Rim to River Loop takes 4 to 6 days to cover 56 miles, 90 kilometers, and 6,000 feet or 1,800 meters of elevation gain and loss. Happy walking. Illinois. On November 28, 1895, James Frank Duryea made history by winning the United States' first ever automobile race. 6 vehicles, 4 cars and 2 motorcycles completed a 54-mile or 87-kilometer loop from Chicago to Evanston and back. And it was chaos. Drivers battled snowstorms, deep snowdrifts, muddy roads, and freezing 38-degree Fahrenheit or 4-degree centigrade temperatures. But Duryea pushed through, finishing in 10 hours and 23 minutes at an average speed of just 7 miles an hour. His reward was a gold medal and a share of the $5,000 prize pool, roughly $189,000 in today's money. Indiana. Why is Indiana nicknamed the Crossroads of America? Besides its relatively central location, it may be because it has more miles of interstate per square mile than any other state. Indianapolis specifically is a major junction for a lot of interstates that connect major cities. I-65, I-69, I-70, and I-74 all run through the state capital. Some historians say that the Crossroads nickname comes from Highways 40 and 41. They were the ones that originally opened up the West to settlement and were made part of the original highway system in 1926. Iowa. Iowa is the only state that has its eastern and western borders formed by rivers, rather than randomly drawn on a map, as is the case with many other U.S. states. The Mississippi River runs down Iowa's east side, while the Missouri River runs down the west. The rivers have also been very important to Iowa's development as a state. Not only did they offer avenues for transportation and settlement, but they also helped develop Iowa's agriculture via irrigation. And farming is a big deal in Iowa, as the state supplies 10% of the entire U.S. food supply. Kansas. Locals may joke about how the state is as flat as a pancake, but scientists decided to test the elevation of Kansas against a standard IHOP pancake. Using a digital model, they found that Kansas is actually flatter than the breakfast favorite. Kentucky. The only town constructed entirely within a meteor crater is in Kentucky. If you drive to the over 10,000-person town of Middlesboro, Kentucky, you might not immediately notice you've descended into a crater, as the town and its surrounding vegetation has grown since then. But it does in fact sit in a 3.6-mile or nearly 6-kilometer wide impact site, though even the town's founders didn't initially know that when they built it in 1810. The crater site was discovered much later in 1966. However, the meteor may be the reason the town exists in the first place. Middlesboro was initially established as a coal and iron mining community. Scientists believe the impact from the crater is what brought coal and iron so close to the surface of the land to begin with. Louisiana. The world's longest bridge over water is Lake Pontchartrain Causeway, just outside of New Orleans. The bridge is 24 miles or 39 kilometers long. In some parts, it's so far over the water that for a good 8 miles or 13 kilometers, you can't actually see land in any direction. This sometimes causes a problem for drivers. After driving for several minutes suspended over water without being able to see land, some people become anxious to the point where they can't continue crossing. More than once, police have had to escort drivers who have stopped in the middle of the bridge, particularly non-locals, to the other side. Maine. Maine has a longer coastline than California. You can double-check your map all you want. It's true. So how is that possible, considering Maine is only around 35,000 square miles in area, and California is almost 164,000 square miles, and both states only have one side on the coast? Well, the answer lies in Maine's very craggy shores. All those tiny bays and inlets add a lot more distance to the specific coastline versus the general state coastline. Maine also has 3,166 offshore islands that contribute to its coastline measurements. So, when all is said and done, Maine has close to 3,500 miles or 5,600 kilometers of tidal shoreline, while California only has around 3,400 miles or 5,400 kilometers. Maryland. Though it may not seem like it at first glance, according to the Maryland Geological Survey, Maryland is the only state without a natural lake. Locals may wonder how that's possible, given the state has over 100 lakes within its borders, including 11.5-mile or 18.5-kilometer long Deep Creek Lake. At the end of the last ice age, when glaciers were retreating north all across the continent, they mostly missed Maryland. And most natural lakes today are the byproduct of glacial scouring across the continent. So today, every lake in Maryland is man-made, created via dams or reservoirs. Massachusetts. Massachusetts may be home to one of the longest-running and silliest border disputes of all time, which created what locals refer to as the Southwick Jog. If you look at the state's southern border, there's a small notch where Massachusetts juts into its otherwise straight boundary with Connecticut. The problem started way back in 1642. The surveyors establishing the boundary between the colonies put the western end too far south. Both colonies hired surveyors to correct this oversight, but the surveyors drew borders that made the colonies that hired them bigger. This went on for 60 years. Then, in 1713, residents of a few southern Massachusetts towns joined Connecticut to avoid high Massachusetts taxes, starting a dispute that went on for another 91 years. In 1804, when everyone was just too bored to tears to deal with it anymore, the two states agreed to split up the 2.5 square miles of land they were arguing about for the last 2 centuries, giving a little more to Massachusetts to make up for the loss of its former towns. Michigan. Michigan is the only state to have two peninsulas. The upper and lower peninsulas are entirely separated by other states and the Great Lakes. But did you know that the Upper Peninsula has tried to secede from Michigan multiple times? Michigan's Lower Peninsula is home to its biggest cities, including Detroit, most of its industry, and 97% of the state's 10 million population. This has made the Upper Peninsula, a mineral-rich area known for its scenic beauty, but also complete lack of industry and people, feel neglected at times. There have been several attempts at secession, including one of the most recent ones in 1962. The Upper Peninsula Independence Association was formed to establish the Upper Peninsula as a new state, Superior. Unfortunately, the group only got 20,000 petition signatures for a referendum, well short of what it needed. Minnesota. The only part of the contiguous U.S. that extends north of the 49th parallel, determined to be the northernmost border with Canada, is the northwest angle of Minnesota. Established because of a map-making error back during the Treaty of Paris in 1783, the border was supposed to cut through the Lake of the Woods at the 49th parallel, but the map of the lake used at the time was mostly a guess. In any case, it's created a weird situation where even though the northwest angle is part of the US, it's technically accessible only via Canada. Unless you want to cross the lake that separates it from the rest of Minnesota. Canadians who come down to fish have to stop at a shed near the border called Jim's Corner and present their passport via videophone to US immigration. It's such a forgotten corner that no one could be bothered to put a real-life border patrolman there. Mississippi. The Gulf Coast of Mississippi is home to the longest man-made beach in the world, running 26 miles or 42 kilometers from Biloxi to Henderson Point on the southern coast of the state. It was originally built for the purpose of controlling erosion, thus protecting the communities that lay further inland. Thanks to Public Law 727 passed in 1946, plenty of seawalls, really important structures along the hurricane-prone Gulf, were built along the Mississippi coast. The artificial beach was put in place to protect the seawalls themselves. Workers raised the coast to increase the area's protection from storms. Missouri. Did you know Missouri is known as the Cave State? Though you may have heard the more common nickname Show Me State instead, apparently what Missouri wants to show you is between 6,400 and 7,500 known caves within its borders. Caves easily form in Missouri because a lot of the state lies on limestone or dolomite. The water seeping through forms big openings over time, eventually developing small caves and even entire cave systems. Montana. Montana is home to the Triple Divide Peak in Glacier National Park, a strange place where rainfall that falls on the mountain can end up in any one of 3 different oceans, or as smarter people call it, the hydrological apex of the North American continent. That's because rain here can end up in 3 different rivers via the creeks that run down the mountain, including the Pacific Creek, Atlantic Creek, and the Hudson Bay Creek. These eventually join the Columbia River that runs to the Pacific Ocean, the Mississippi River that goes to the Gulf of America, internationally known as the Gulf of Mexico, and the Hudson Bay, which connects to the Arctic Ocean. Nebraska. Unlike Kansas, Nebraska isn't as flat as you might think. In fact, it's home to the biggest spread of sand dunes in North America, known as sand hills. These dunes cover between 19,000 and 20,000 square miles, or around 50,000 square kilometers in the western part of Nebraska, or roughly 1/4 of the state. The coolest part is what formed the dunes. When glaciers were retreating north between 1.8 million to 10,000 years ago, they eroded the Rocky Mountains and dragged down sediment from them to the ground. Over time, the sediment deposits got covered by grasslands, forming the hills you see in Nebraska today. Nevada. Nevada isn't just dry desert. It has more mountain ranges than any other state, with 314 found within its borders. In fact, 35 mountains in Nevada reach up to over 10,000 feet or 3,000 meters in elevation, making the state much more varied in landscape than most people imagine. However, you still got the dry part of Nevada right. In fact, Nevada is the driest state in the US. Between 1895 and 2020, the state averaged only 10.2 inches or 26 centimeters in rain per year, with averages in low elevations down to around 7 inches or about 18 centimeters. New Hampshire. New Hampshire is second only to Alaska in the percent of the state that is forested. Forests cover 82% of the state, or about 4.7 million acres, 19,000 square kilometers. However, a lot of the state's forests are newer than you would think. In the 18th and 19th centuries, New Hampshire was almost completely deforested as settlers from Europe cleared out trees to both create farms and sell wood. By the 1850s, the trees in over 70% of land south of the White Mountains had been cleared. Then, in 1910, the New Hampshire State Forest Nursery was established to attempt to regrow the cleared forests, a very successful effort considering the present state of New Hampshire. But still, you won't find many trees more than 150 years old here. New Jersey. New Jersey is the most densely populated state in the US, with over 1,263 people per square mile. Besides the fact that the state has plenty of urban centers within its borders, like Newark and Jersey City, it also has a lot of suburbs and commuting hubs. These suburbs are home to people who work in the mega-dense center of New York City, not to mention suburbs for Philadelphia as well. The reason New York isn't the most dense state is because outside of New York City and its immediate surrounding areas, the state is relatively sparsely populated. New Mexico. 75% of roads in New Mexico, or about 25,000 miles or 40,000 kilometers of them, are unpaved. The rugged landscapes that make New Mexico such an attractive destination for visitors also make paving little-used or out-of-the-way roads a big pain. That means that a lot of roads, especially outside the big cities, are composed of dirt, sand, clay, and caliche, a sedimentary rock made up of limestone. Not only are these roads found in national forests and other protected areas, New Mexico actually has an entire state route, New Mexico State Road 204, that is made up of 10.8 miles or 17.5 kilometers of gravel road. New York. New York is home to the world's largest train station by number of platforms and area, Grand Central in New York City. Built between 1903 and 1913, the station is already famous for its grand, beautiful architecture. But many people don't know it's also the biggest in the world. The train station currently has 44 platforms and 67 tracks. An estimated 750,000 people commute through it every single day. Thousands more come by just to grab lunch or a drink in famous establishments within the station, like the Campbell Bar. While that's an impressive number, it still doesn't make it the largest train station in the world by volume, though. That would be Shinjuku Station in Tokyo, which handles 3.6 million passengers daily. North Carolina. The Outer Banks of North Carolina are a popular surfing spot, a Netflix show, and the graveyard of the Atlantic all at once. Though these days the area is better known for tourism and improbable storylines, it's also been a horrifically dangerous place for ships historically. From 1526 to today, over 5,000 ships have sunk in this area, many with no survivors. The island of Hatteras specifically has seen over 600 shipwrecks, which is perhaps why the Graveyard of the Atlantic Museum is found here today. A combination of clashing ocean currents off the coast, temperamental weather, and shifting sands on the sandbars off the coast make the area dangerous for sailing, though people do still enjoy boat trips in the area on days with good weather. North Dakota. People don't usually associate North Dakota with an abundance of animals, as the state's landscape and climate can be difficult for life. But it turns out North Dakota has more wildlife refuges than any other state, numbering 63 total. They cover 340,000 acres, or just shy of 1,400 square kilometers of the state, and are home to mammals, birds, and reptiles, including elk, moose, game birds, waterfowl, foxes, and bison. One of the most prominent refuges is the Lostwood National Wildlife Refuge, which has preserved huge areas of mixed grass prairie native to the state. Ohio. The Cuyahoga River in Ohio has caught on fire over a dozen times in the 20th century alone. Thanks to nearby steel mills and other manufacturing plants, the river was intensely polluted, often covered in oil slicks with dead animals floating on the surface. Steelworker Tim Donovan said of the river up until 1969, the river was a scary little thing. There was a general rule that if you fell in, God forbid, you would go immediately to the hospital. When it caught fire one last time on June 22, 1969, it got people around the country so fed up with conditions there that it helped helped trigger the founding of the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, and the Clean Water Act of 1972. Oklahoma. Oklahoma is home to the only U.S. county that borders 4 states. Cimarron County, located in the far west of the Panhandle, borders Texas, New Mexico, Colorado, and Kansas. Not many people enjoy this county's unique status, though, because Cimarron only has a population of around 2,200 people. Oregon. The deepest lake in the U.S. is Crater Lake in Oregon's aptly named Crater Lake National Park. It's almost 2,000 feet or 610 meters deep, meaning you could stack 2 Eiffel Towers on top of each other inside the lake and just barely see the top of one peeking out. Crater Lake was formed only 7,700 years ago. Native Americans in the area were already around to witness the eruption of Mount Mazama that led to its eventual collapse, creating a huge caldera. The caldera filled with water and snowmelt relatively quickly in the wet Pacific Northwest, thereby creating Crater Lake. Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania was home to the first electrified city in the United States, Scranton, better known to modern audiences as the setting for the TV show The Office. To this day, it's still known as the Electric City. The Dixon Manufacturing Company installed electric lights in 1880, and by 1886, the city had streetcars that ran solely on electric power. Turns out, electric vehicles have been around a lot longer than we think. At the time, Scranton had thriving coal and steel industries, likely one of the reasons it was the first to get electricity. Rhode Island. The oldest restaurant in the United States is located in Newport, Rhode Island. Called the White Horse Tavern, it was first opened in 1673, when the state was still a colony. Back then, as some taverns did at the time, it served multiple purposes, including being used as a meeting place, a city hall, and even a courthouse. The White Horse Tavern is still open and operating today, specializing in farm-to-table cuisine and rum drinks. South Carolina. South Carolina has a monkey colony. On otherwise uninhabited Morgan Island, you'll find rhesus monkeys running all over the place, which is why many locals nicknamed the place Monkey Island. The monkey colony, which has now grown to 3,500 Indian origin monkeys, was originally established in Puerto Rico. However, the monkeys would often escape, and some would do so while carrying and transmitting herpes B infections. Local islanders, who preferred to remain herpes-free, complained, and South Carolina volunteered to have almost 1,400 animals transferred to their uninhabited 4,500-acre marshland island. South Dakota. South Dakota has a longer shoreline than Florida. Yep, it turns out that's due to multiple rivers crisscrossing the state, which end up counting shorelines on both sides of the rivers as opposed to the nearly 8,400 miles of coastline that Florida counts on the ocean, and the massive Lake Oahe. Oahe is a 231-mile or 370-kilometer-long reservoir along the Missouri River, the major river system winding its way through the state. But you can also find the Cheyenne River, Big Sioux, White, and James Rivers here. If you want to go for a swim on a sunny day, though, Florida is still probably the better destination. Tennessee. Tennessee has the largest underground lake in the country, fittingly called the Lost Sea. 140 feet or 43 meters underground, within the Craighead Caverns lies a massive body of water. It was first discovered in 1905 when a 13-year-old boy crawled through a small opening in the cave system and discovered a huge room of water. The visible part of the lake is 800 feet by 220 feet wide, but divers and scientists have mapped out at least 13 acres. In fact, people still don't know how big the lake is, or even where it ends. Texas. Texas is the U.S. state with the most ghost towns. To be clear, this doesn't mean haunted places, but rather towns that have been abandoned over time. The Lone Star State has 511 ghost towns, easily outranking the second state on the list, California, with 346 ghost towns. A lot of them, like the relatively well-known town of Terlingua, are mining towns that got abandoned when reserves ran out or the price of precious metals dropped. Utah. The Great Salt Lake didn't get its name by accident. The south arm of the lake is so salty that it's 3 to 5 times saltier than the ocean. The north arm, 10 times saltier than the ocean. So why does Utah have a lake with so much salt? First of all, the Great Salt Lake has no natural drainage, so the salt and minerals deposited in it have nowhere to go. Second, the Great Salt Lake is actually a leftover from a much bigger geographical feature known as Lake Bonneville, which covered almost a quarter of Utah's land in its time, 20,000 square miles, or just south of 52,000 square kilometers. That freshwater lake formed 32,000 years ago, reaching depths of 1,000 feet or 300 meters. Then, 14,500 years ago, the wall of the lake was breached and water came crashing out into the landscape around it. The lake dropped 350 feet 100 meters in a matter of weeks, and severe droughts over the next several years took care of most of the rest of the water, leaving only the Great Salt Lake. Vermont. Texas is widely known as being the sole state to have been an independent republic, but that's actually not true. Vermont was an independent country longer than Texas was. From 1777 to 1791, Vermont decided to take advantage of the Revolutionary War to declare its own independence from everyone, British and US land alike. New York, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire had been fighting over Vermont for a while, insisting they each had land claims to it. Vermont got so sick of the fighting that it just left. However, they still did fight on the American side during the war. The Vermont Constitution is also famous for immediately abolishing slavery and giving all free men the right to vote. Virginia. When you think internet capital of the world, you might think of some advanced, high-tech city like Tokyo, New York, or Hong Kong. But the internet capital of the world is actually in Loudoun County, Virginia, specifically in the town of Ashburn. The county has become a huge tech hub, with such powerful digital infrastructure that over 70% of the world's internet traffic is directed through data centers within the county. That's why this area in Northern Virginia is also nicknamed Data Center Alley, and has around 12 million square feet or 1 million square meters of data center space. Washington. Washington is home to the largest ferry operator in the country, Washington State Ferries, or WSF. WSF also happens to be the second largest ferry system in the world, after British Columbia BC ferries. Though most non-locals don't associate the state of Washington with island life, the San Juan Islands just off the coast have 172 named islands, 16 of which are inhabited, which may be why WSF carries around 44,700 passengers per weekday as of 2024. West Virginia. West Virginia is the only state that lies entirely within a mountain range, the Appalachians. While this state creates some pretty stunning landscapes and scenic beauty in the area, it's also part of the reason the state is the second poorest in the nation, with a median income of $51,200. Farms in the state generally aren't very productive because of the steep slopes and difficult terrain. Building the infrastructure needed for large-scale industry is also challenging due to the mountainous landscape. It may not be the only reason for poverty in the state, but it definitely hasn't helped. Wisconsin. Though it may be known for its cheeses, Wisconsin is the world leader in another type of food production: cranberries. The US produces the most cranberries by far internationally, and Wisconsin produces around 2/3 of that harvest. In 2024, that amounted to 4.9 million barrels, or 61% of the country's crop. And last but not least, Wyoming. Wyoming is home to the first national monument, Devil's Tower. In 1906, Theodore Roosevelt, a lover of nature and the great outdoors, designated it a national site. The massive rock formation had already been known as a sacred place for over 20 tribes in the area. The tower is 867 feet or 264 meters tall, with a summit that spans an acre and a half in size, or 6,000 square meters. Did you know these crazy state facts? Tell us your favorite fact about your state below. In the meantime, check out this video right here or another video of ours right over here. Thanks for watching, and as always, I'll see you on the next episode of Map Pack.